Hello, everyone. We're going to give it a couple minutes to get everybody in this session. So go ahead, if you're already in, drop in the chat where you're calling in from. Love to hear where everybody's reaching in. Costa Rica, all right. And if you haven't been on any of our sessions prior to this, the song that I'm playing is kind of our adopted song that we've started with around asset management. It's the AI generated song. So I'll drop in the chat the link to it if you're interested in using it later on. Oh, I got somebody from Houston, Texas. Woo woo! Maryland, Virginia, Dallas, another Texas, Pennsylvania. Awesome. All right, give it about another 30 seconds and then we'll get started. California, St. Louis, Phoenix, Dakota, North Michigan. All right. Looks like everybody's from the US so far, or Costa Rica. Well, first one put in there. So it's a unique one. I'd love to see if anybody else outside of the US, maybe. Seattle, yes. I was there earlier and loved the view, and everybody was super nice. So I definitely will be planning on going back to Seattle soon. I was there for a workshop earlier this year. So another Costa Rica, awesome. All right, well, we are going to go ahead and kick off our session. Again, thank you for joining. We'll do some introductions. We have a new guest, or a special guest joining us today, and Rich actually won't be on the call. So I'll start with myself. My name is Michelle Campos, and I'm an ITAM solution consultant here at ServiceNow. I joined ServiceNow a couple years ago from a practitioner standpoint. So I've been a customer of ServiceNow using asset management, both hardware and software asset management, and managing teams that were using the data behind the asset management. Rich, who is my partner that does these sessions with me as well, is actually in Chicago today. We had the Chicago Summit. So he's there doing a workshop and has dropped in some notes to me to tell everyone he says hello. So, but he will be back for our next session, and we'll talk about what that next session will be. And then I would love to introduce Tim. Tim, do you want to take a moment and kind of introduce you to the guest?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Michelle. Hey, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today with Michelle doing this webinar. So my name's Tim Wormwood. I am an advisory solution consultant here at ServiceNow, and I specialize in ServiceNow security operations offerings. Been here about a year and a half. And before that, I was at a customer, and I was a security practitioner. So I was a security architect, and I focused on identity, cloud security, and I did a lot of every security professional's least favorite thing, which was writing security policy as well. So super excited to be here with you for the next hour.
Policies are so much fun, let me tell you. I know from the ITAM perspective all about it, but the great thing about having Tim here, very similar to Rich and myself, is that he's been in those pain points, right? He understands the importance of a good security practice. He understands the importance of ServiceNow and bringing the holistic data set together within asset management. We'll kind of talk about that. But just knowing that we've been in your shoes should help you with understanding where some of the conversation will be coming from. So, Safe Harbor, we don't have anything in this session that's looking into the future, but if for some reason we were to talk about roadmaps, we will definitely let you know, and just be aware that those are things that we're forward-looking statements. And then just to kind of give a little tidbit, we will be doing a session about the Xanadu release and some of those things that are coming within asset management. It will be probably another 2 months, so not next month, is the following month. But in the meantime, keep your eyes open. There's going to be definitely recordings out there to show you what's coming out. We'll jump into the agenda really quickly, and then the good part of the wine. So really to understand what we're going to be talking about is, how does ITAM support SecOps? And that's not necessarily just within the platform, but just overall, some of those policy procedures, right? Or we'll start noticing some of the overlap and understanding how SecOps utilizes some of the asset management inventory for securing their assets. And then the second, why is it important to manage those assets where you manage vulnerabilities? So getting more into the platform play and understanding why ServiceNow managing your assets where you manage your vulnerabilities is important, and how ServiceNow can help you with that. I'll jump through a very quick demo with the end of life, end of support reporting capabilities that are offered within HAM and SAM. Just showing you the reporting that we provide and how it can be useful, again, by the SecOps team. And then Tim will actually take a little bit more of a lead and show you some of the demonstration around zero-day exposure and the assessment within ServiceNow. We'll end it with upcoming events, some of the workshops that we have going on that you might be interested in. We'll stop the recording as we always do, give you the ability to ask questions either through Q&A or come off mute and feel free to ask us in live. I guess, kind of housekeeping rules or housekeeping. If you have any questions, drop them in Q&A. If you have any, tidbits or anything that maybe you've run across, because it's definitely a community here. We want to have you, kind of come in and chime into different things of how you're using something. Maybe if we're talking about it, feel free to drop that in the chat and communicate with us. So this is the wine part, Tim. We're going to get to try some wine. As I say, each and every time, so if you've been on each one of these sessions, I'm sorry for repeating myself. I'm not a wine connoisseur. I enjoy a glass of wine every now and then. Probably every time I'm on here is each time I'm having a glass of wine. I don't have them too much outside of here. I'm definitely looking to get into the whole vineyard thing and the experience behind the wine. So I'm hoping to kind of get into that when things cool down. I am inside Houston, Texas, and I think we're close to that 100 range as far as temperatures go. So I'm not going to be sitting outside enjoying wine. Just not my cup of tea. But Tim, if you want to come off mute and talk about the wine that you chose, and then I'll go ahead and launch a poll, and if you can make some suggestions, anybody out there, different wines that you like, so we can utilize those later on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I too am not I am not a big wine person. My wife is the wine drinker in the house, so I'm much more likely to get a nice hazy New England IPA. Disclaimer: I live in upstate New York, so if you're not familiar with what a New England IPA is, it's like a slightly fruity IPA that doesn't give you a killer hangover the next day or a headache. So my wine I chose, Vint. It's a Robert Mondavi, and it's a Cabernet. What sold me on this is that it was aged in bourbon barrels, so I think it's going to have some interesting flavor notes. So definitely looking forward to trying this out.
Love it. All right, so there's 5. You have to try it in front of everybody. So if you make a face, they're going to know you like it or you don't like it.
So I like real time have to pour it and try it right now?
Yes. Did you bring a glass, or are you going to let us know how it was after the call?
I have a glass. I'm gonna pour and sample right now.
While you're doing that, I'll go ahead and talk about the wine that I chose. Or I guess I should say my husband chose, because I was running last minute to the grocery store and I begged him to pick up something. But it's called San Antonio. If any familiar with, Texas, we have a city called San Antonio, which is one of my favorite cities to go on the river walk and enjoy a nice stroll, and maybe a couple drinks. But he picked it up because I've been begging to go back to San Antonio. So that was his kind of influence behind it. But this is strawberry and guava. So what did you think, Tim? Did you like it?
Yeah, it was good. You definitely taste a little bourbon flavor in there, which is a-okay with me. So I'm a fan. Side note, no wine in grocery stores in New York State. That's like a law here. So
Oh, I
inconvenient.
I forget about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have family in Baltimore, and every time we try and go get wine or any kind of drink, right there, you have to go to a separate store. So
Yep.
here in Texas, yeah, you are allowed to. There's specific alcohol that they're able to sell. Probably not the hardcore stuff, but more of the wines and things of that nature. So this one's definitely good. Not as good as the chocolate flavored one I had last time. Definitely a chocolate fan, any kind of chocolate, but this one's definitely good. I will definitely have a couple glasses. So let's start diving in. Anybody that's, again, joined this session, they understand why we're doing this webinar series, but each month we do a session where we deep dive into specific areas of asset management, or as we're doing today, better together stories with different products on the platform. And it's really just to help the practitioners, to help the people that have the hands on the keyboards that are trying to do day in and day out tasks around, like I said, asset management, SecOps, things of that nature. We were practitioners. We understand the pains of trying to keep up with changes and things that are being released on a regular basis. So our goal in this is to open it up and have kind of a community where you can come in and learn different things. We can do a deep dive into that, but really just making sure that we're helping the customers that are interested in understanding and learning different things within the platform or within our products. So we talk about asset management, and you've all heard this. We really, in this session, in this specific webinar series, we stay focused within software asset management and hardware asset management. And then today we're going to talk about SecOps and how they kind of relate back together. So this is just kind of a visual of where we'll reside today when we're talking about it. And the reason why, right? So the reason why we want to talk about security, one, this was one of the suggested topics that a few of y'all had voted on in previous sessions. So we appreciate that. But two is a lot of the, reporting and metrics that we receive back is security and asset management go hand in hand. And I think Tim can really kind of relate to this as well as myself, is I can't tell you how many calls or how many meetings I had where my CISO was not involved in those meetings, right? And the reason is because a lot of times we needed to relate and share information and understand what policies I had in place versus what policies she had in place, and making sure that we didn't have any gaps within those policies that could ultimately expose us to vulnerabilities. So really, when you are talking about security, it's how do you secure your assets, right? That's the goal. This is a poll that we ran. We didn't have it run. We had a company run it for us against all different customers, not just ServiceNow customers. And this was one of their responses with which business metrics are used today to measure a successful ITAM program. And if you look at it, 46% of those customers said security risk, minimizing security risk. Anything you want to add to that, Tim? Any
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. There's a significant overlap between having a robust asset management program and a robust security program, because we don't care about barcodes on devices and what stockroom they're in, but we do care about the data that's stored on them and ensuring that we know the software that's installed on them, that software is up to date. And we can't secure what we don't know about, and there's often significant visibility gaps in enterprises that a good ITAM program can help alleviate those gaps.
Yeah, you stole my thunder. My next slide. So it's as if you knew what was coming, right? But truly, I can tell you at least twice with customers I've had a CISO say this comment to me in some form or fashion, right? But I can't secure what I don't know about.
Yeah, spot
And
on.
that's true. It's true. If you didn't know that there's, a laptop that's on your network and is trying to, come in and do harm to your network, how are you supposed to secure it, right? So there's different things that you can do from a security standpoint. I'm not going to be that specialist, Tim. You feel free to do it, but having a true inventory helps minimize the work that security has to do to make sure that they're putting in all those rules and regulations and identifying things that should or shouldn't be on that network. But when you talk about security, and I actually would like to bring up an example. So I was at a workshop recently where one of the customers asked, well, how do you do vulnerability management within the platform? Because, my SecOps team, and this was the ITAM manager, my SecOps team is relying on me to provide them with some information, and I don't feel like I'm security, so I shouldn't have to provide that to them. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, you all work for the same company. You want to make sure that you become good friends with them, right? Because security can make your life a pain in the butt if you don't, right? So right? Like they that's what they live for, is definitely making sure that, we can't do our work as we need to do it. But it only makes sense, and you've heard me say this time in and time out, is bringing the stakeholders to the table, and security is going to be one of your number one stakeholders. Finance, I say, is another one. Legal is another one, but security, building that relationship between the asset management team and the security team is going to be very important. And you can see here how some of the overlap between the two, right? And how you want to make sure you can get that great relationship.
Yeah, that's a great slide, Michelle. I just wanted to point out, like, I saw a lot of points there that, like, even like, disposal and compliance, like that, maybe that's one of the less glamorous areas of security, but ensuring that assets are run through the life cycle, appropriately and at the end of their life. I've worked for companies where, like, the drives had to literally be pulled out and shredded.
Yeah.
So, that isn't, like I said, not really super glamorous, but very important part of security and compliance, and just being able to track that's fantastic.
It's actually kind of fun. If you've ever sat and watched them shred some of those hard drives, it's pretty cool. So I worked for a company. I worked for a financial institution where we actually had disposal vendors come on site. They would bring a truck on site and dispose of hard drives, so that way we could get compliance, the certificate of compliance on hand, and things weren't ultimately getting out of hand and we weren't able to track them. So, but that's the difference between a security guy and an ITM girl, right? Security guy, like, doesn't want to watch it. I'm like, oh, wow, like, watch it get all crushed up. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
The policies now, on the other hand, they can definitely be annoying at times, but there's a reason that they're there. So when we talk about why doing asset management and SecOps, security operations on one location, on one platform is important. If you look at this specific statistic, it talks about incomplete or siloed, conflicting or inadequate asset information has an effect on your organization. And if you see number 2, 17%, it puts security and compliance at risk. So we want to make sure, again, not just from a financial perspective, because if you get these vulnerability attacks, you're going to get penalized. You're going to have to notify your customers and possibly put some financial, ramifications behind it. But the worst thing is your reputation. It takes years to build good reputations, and having customers build good, or having your business build a good reputation, but it only takes minutes for it to go away. That's another kind of quote that I had seen on the back end. But it's really important. So we'll keep talking about how ServiceNow can help within that space. So if you talk about the life cycle of an asset, because asset management is that life cycle, right? We're trying to track the life cycle of the asset. You can see here, we have it all the way from, the asset request to provisioning to, the operations of it. Is it on? Is it alerting? Is it broken? And then you can see up here, we have the vulnerabilities, right? So this is where we're going to really stay focused today, starting to talk about how we can make sure that those vulnerabilities are minimized and how to take actions on them when you need to. But the beauty of the platform is we can meet you in all these spaces, right? Every single one of these bullets within here are products or functionalities that we have within the platform to make sure that you have a holistic view of what's going on within the asset itself. So keep that in mind. And this is some examples of different areas within the lifecycle that we can are kind of the better together. So you can see here, the request is asset management and ITSM. So is it, are you requesting that through a portal? Onboarding employees better together with HR. ITAM, keeping visibility into what's going on and automating that visibility. And then you can see here in that monitor piece, we have SecOps, right? So that vulnerability. But these are some of the examples of those better together stories. So keep this in mind because we will launch another poll at the end. And if there's an interest in some of the better together, definitely put that in as far as a suggestion for future conversations. And then we can do this with another person on our team and, have a specialist come in. We have done an ITOM one with Will, and that went over really well. Lots of questions and engagement, which is out on our website. I'll show you in a moment. But just keep in mind these different talk tracks, and if there's something of interest, definitely keep us in the loop, and we'll make sure that we can get to it. So really quickly, I'm going to take a moment and jump into my instance and show you some of the end of life, end of support reporting that we provide within the content service. So let me jump into the slide really quickly. When we talk about the content service, there's two components of it. So there's the normalization feature that we provide, and then there's the library of data that we're providing. And the thing that we're going to specifically jump in today are the lifecycle dates. So these lifecycle dates are specific to what's been released out there in the industry, to specific publishers or manufacturers on the hardware side. These are not dates that we're making up. These are dates that have been, again, publicly released, and we're basically collecting that information on our ServiceNow team. We're collecting that information and then updating the library, and that feed comes into your instance on a weekly basis. So what I'm going to do is jump into my instance really quickly as my phone goes off. My boss calling me, checking up on me. So I'm in the hardware asset. We'll jump into the software asset as well, but this is that hardware asset overview page where you can see, the high level reporting and what's going on in your environment, things that you have to take action on. But if you scroll down, you'll see here, we had the hardware model lifecycle overview. So this is a report that you can drill into. We'll go ahead and drill into it here. And there's another way to get to it, and I'll show you here in a minute. But you can see here, these are all the models that I have in my environment. I specifically clicked on end of life. If you want to remove end of life and get a holistic report, you can do that as well, remove the filter. But for this, we can see we have one that's really, really old. We would hope that you don't have this in your environment, but I think Tim and I both know that we talk to customers on a daily basis that do have really old equipment in their environment. So here you can come into this specific hardware model, and I can see all of my assets and where they're at. So at this point, maybe I would take action on these and, start working to refresh these, get these out of my environment, and, move forward with it, right? And Tim will show you how he's going to leverage some of this information on the software side to do his reporting. But you can come in here and drill in, if I wanted to look at the next thing that's coming that's not currently out of life, we could take a look at this Dell PowerEdge. Again, I have my assets here. I have my life cycle here. So this is giving me all of the life cycles to this specific model. And you can see that it's going into life 2025. So now the important thing is you're now becoming proactive instead of retroactive, and you can start taking action on these items prior to them going end of life, right? So let's help the TIMs of the world, let's help the security teams of the world refresh, get those assets out of the environment, and ultimately reduce that exposure to vulnerabilities for things that are not no longer patched. So if you look here, for anybody that's not familiar with this, this is the actual report itself. So if I wanted to go to this table, I can go to the filter navigator, enter it in. If you do capital list, it'll open up a new tab and it'll bring me to the same report with all of the information as well. So different ways. If you prefer the table view, you can do that. If you want to use the workspace view, which is what this is called, you can do that as well. And this information is exportable. So you could have it on a one-time download. You could have it scheduled on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, quarterly, whatever you want, and schedule that out to your different teams. And if I go over to the software side, again, I'm on that overview landing page. So I can jump in here and I can come down here and see the products that are end of life and just support. So if I jumped into end of support, I can see here Microsoft Word 2011. I have 3 installs out there. I can see when it went end of support. So it looks like it's going end of extended support in October of this year. If I wanted to get into that information of what's actually out there and installed and where it's installed, I can come in here and see that, which specific device is installed on. So that's, again, just another way to get to the reporting. And then the table view would be this SAM_SW_product_life_lifecycle_report. So you can get to the table view if you wanted to do that, exportable as well. So that's just a quick overview of some of the functionality that we provide to you out of the box as soon as you opt into the content library. Again, this job is run on a weekly basis, so this information will be populated into your instance for you to start taking action on it real time. I'm going to jump back into the slides. Let me scroll down. Looks like, Tim, you're next, so you want me to go ahead and just stop sharing and then you can take over?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
I just have a little commentary on all of the end of life, availability as well. So when I see, Optiplex GX280s, man, I remember deploying those right out of college, like hundreds of them. It really can be, end of life software is one thing, right? So when I hear end of life software, I think vulnerabilities, right? Software that's no longer receiving security updates, meaning that, threat actors can go out and find vulnerabilities and find a way to break into your stuff. But there is a risk in also running, and it's maybe not a SecOps risk, it's more of a business risk, right? But running your business on 15-year-old servers that are outdated, are not getting firmware updates. Maybe you can or can't get components, RAID cards, drives, whatever you might need for them. So that is still part of the broader risk umbrella,
100%,
right?
yeah.
So your security folks may not, maybe won't be like, well, there's a vulnerability there, but maybe there is, right? The firmware is not getting patched, but
yeah,
in the least, for both of those scenarios, right? End of life software and end of life hardware. Based on my experience as a practitioner, there's going to be a risk acceptance process that folks are going to have to go to. You're going to need to document why you can't upgrade it, why it's still out there, why you're running production on an Optiplex GX280 under someone's desk. You're going to have to provide probably have to work with your teams compensating controls, right? Maybe there's a spare GX280 under your desk. That's not a good compensating control, but those are things that your leadership is going to want to be aware of and have visibility into. So the ability to see that's really cool. So
yeah, it's running business as usual, right? You, like you said, maybe you can't even get parts, or you can't do upgrades, or you can no longer support applications that are on there. And then now all of a sudden you're at a frantic stage where you're trying to figure out how you're going to make things work, right? I talked to customers on the software side 2012 where it was like they had no idea. And then they were supporting other customers where it was just a sporadic chaos to go out and figure out how they were going to ultimately upgrade everybody. And when you're talking about servers, it's not an overnight thing, right? It takes time developing, figuring out,
Yeah.
testing, all that. So good
Yeah.
point.
And especially if you haven't like built your environment, to be redundant, right? So you're talking about outages, a lot of planning. I've been there personally as an engineer, like just having to deal with all from that. So as a practitioner, that cuts me deep. I feel that pain. Like I've been there. It's not fun. So
And it's funny when you start getting goosebumps because you start going back to memories, you know,
yeah.
regulations and regulatory audits were the ones that give me the goosebumps. I'm like, don't put me back in that world. So.
Yep. 100%. Let me know when you can see my screen here and I'll kind of start running through.
You're good to go. If
Awesome.
y'all have any questions while he's running through this, feel free to drop them in the Q&A and I'll do my best attempt to answer them. If not, we can definitely answer them after we stop the recording too.
Cool.
Thanks,
All
Tim.
right. Yeah, so this isn't gonna be an exhaustive deep dive into VR. We don't have enough time for that. So that being said, the super 30,000 foot high level view is that vulnerability response is one of the SecOps modules that ServiceNow offers. Vulnerability management, running a vulnerability management program nowadays is fully a team sport. You've got your security teams scanning for vulnerabilities, monitoring those vulnerabilities in your environment, figuring out, what do we want to focus on, and getting those things kind of thrown over the fence to IT traditionally for patching and remediation. So with that in mind, VR is designed, it has 2 workspaces out of the box. So we have our vulnerability manager workspace. There is also a secondary workspace for your IT remediators that's much more focused on getting things, into change management, providing solutions and, orchestrating patch deployment so that folks can, remediate more quickly. So we're not going to go into the IT remediation workspace today just because of the scope of this demo, but this is the vulnerability manager workspace. So what we have the ability to do here is let's use a scenario where we have a 0 day that's come out. And, these are becoming more and more common. I'm sure you've heard of some of them over the last couple of years. Log4j. I personally was like boots on the ground for Log4j in a practitioner role. I still have PTSD from it. SolarWinds, MoveIt was another big one a couple of years ago that came out that everyone was scrambling and running around like crazy trying to figure out their exposure and pulling logs to see if their systems had been accessed. It was crazy. So and this is sample 0 day, right? We don't have a CVE, or maybe we do, right? That can depend. Sometimes these things come out and there is not a CVE yet. But maybe there is some guidance from the vendor around compensating controls, or maybe you need to get a group policy created that pushes out a registry change to fix all your workstations downstream. The problem is that your vulnerability scanner is not going to know about it yet. So your vulnerability scanner is going to rely on like a signature, like an EDR or an antivirus solution. But then it also needs to scan your network. And scans of networks can take days. I've seen scans of networks take weeks. And this can really vary very widely based on the types of scans you're doing. Maybe you're not allowed to scan certain network segments during business hours because it might slow some processes down. Maybe you have to wait for a maintenance window on a Saturday night when no one's working. I've seen all of that, and it's very true that it can take days or weeks to get a full scan back and get the data imported. So in the case of those 0 days that I mentioned, there was really an urgency to hit the ground running really rapidly, get ahead of it, come up with a plan, get your compensating controls in place or your mitigations in place. And this is where the better together story is going to come into play. And that's having the ability to do an exposure assessment from within the vulnerability manager workspace and leverage the SAM data, right? So we've got an accurate accounting of our software that's deployed across our estate. So we know the versions, we know the publisher and the versions that are at risk for the 0 day. So what we can do is we can go in here, we can add a new criteria for an assessment, publisher, product. If you know the version, which you probably won't based on a 0-day that's published, you would punch that in. And then it's going to pull that data back from software asset management. And we're going to come back with an overall count, right? So how many unique installations of the software exist in our environment? And what are we going to do with that? So within vulnerability response, we're not directly working with configuration items or CVEs, or actually the kind of like base unit of work is called a vulnerable item, or a VIT. You can see it says VIT creation count right here. And at its core, what a VIT is the marrying of a CVE or a vulnerability and a configuration item. So if you have a laptop ABC with a vulnerability on it, that's going to be its own unique vulnerable item. And that vulnerable item is what is used to drive through the entire life cycle of the remediation process. So once you've got your software discovered here, you've pulled it back into this workspace, we've run the report, the data's come back, we can actually select it and we can go ahead and we can create vulnerable items here. Again, we can select an existing or new vulnerability. If it's a new vulnerability, you need to just put a CVE entry and a description here. And what that's going to do is that's going to go out and then create these vulnerable items. Now, I've already gone ahead and kind of pre-created this for this sample vulnerability for SQL Enterprise 2017. And what this is going to allow you to do is now you're ahead of the game. You're not relying on a network scan. The data's there. The vulnerable items have been created. Your vulnerability managers, again, knowing this is a high-risk vulnerability, we need to get ahead of it really quickly. They're going to go out here and create a watch topic. And so watch topic is kind of like slicing and dicing vulnerability information. You can see this can be really broad. So we can have like any vulnerability on a Windows host or a Linux host, or we could have, the for specific log4j vulnerabilities, or in this case, this one that I just created, right? So it's one specific CVE. What this watch topic is going to show us is, trending information over time, how many of the vulnerable items that we created are in a remediation effort. And a remediation effort is what drives that downstream work from your IT remediation teams. We can see a list of configuration items that are associated with it. Are those internet facing? I wouldn't want a SQL server being internet facing, but that's a good data point to have, right? And that's a CMDB attribute that we can pull back and just visualize here for risk scoring. So we can see the distinct vulnerabilities associated with it. It was just one in this case. And then how many vulnerable items were created. So it was 88. We can see in this table, the vulnerable item number, what the CI classes it's associated with, a summary of the vulnerability, and the configuration item it's directly associated with. So then, and again, I'm going to stop here. I'm not going to dive into the IT piece of it, but all you would want to do is your vulnerability manager is going to want to go ahead and create a remediation effort. And what that's going to do is bundle up the tasks, based on how you configured the grouping within vulnerability response, and it's going to send it over to the IT teams for remediation. So that's just a great example of how you can use that, near real time to determine your exposure to a potential 0-day.
Love it. And we had a question in the chat, which I've answered, but feel free to give your perspective on it. Their specific question was, is SecOps part of software asset management or hardware asset management or ITAM, right? And my response was, no, it's actually part of a different component within the platform itself. But what you're showing today is how you can leverage, because you are on one platform, you can leverage the inventory that asset management team is ultimately sourcing and providing versus it being in a siloed tool or a spreadsheet, right? I like to say spreadsheets are our #1 competitor in the asset space, right? But something out there outside, not residing within the platform, but if you're using it within the same platform that your security team is managing their vulnerabilities within, they can ultimately source that data quickly, like what you showed, right, with that SQL server, source that data in that inventory quickly and take action on it. You're not waiting to reach out to the Michelles of the world or the ITAMs of the world for them to export inventory. You just start looking and stuff. Does that make sense? Would you answer it any differently or add context to that?
No, that's perfect. It's just like you said, it's just a great better together story, being able to pull, unified platform, unified data model, being able to pull that information in real time and not, not have to wait for a rescan, which is what you would have to do if you didn't have that data, readily available, right?
Gotcha. So good question. And again, I want to keep encouraging people. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. We'll definitely make sure that we get to them. Tim, do you want to talk just a little bit about kind of what you showed, maybe summarize it, or would you like me to keep going on to the next slide completely?
Yeah, no, I can summarize it really quickly. So yeah, exactly. I just kind of summed up what I was going to show here in bullet points. So what I showed was just the better together story between ServiceNow's vulnerability response and software asset management, allowing your security teams to manage their response to a potential zero-day event, utilizing VR and some supporting workflows. So we leveraged the exposure assessment within VR. We leveraged that downstream SAM data to identify potential exposures. And that's just going to drive down your overall time to respond and remediate, which are the two biggest, threats in a zero-day scenario, right? Getting out ahead of the threat actors. And, lastly, just being able to leverage those cross-platform workflows for the overall response process. So, I showed creating vulnerable items as like a manual action. So that's not within vulnerability response. They're not manually created. What happens is scanner data comes in and is matched against CMDB/CIs with vulnerabilities, and VIs are created automatically. So, but again, we're just showcasing how you don't need to wait for your scanner to come back with that data payload. You can get ahead of this and you will manually create them, but you're drastically reducing your time to respond.
Yeah, so different options, right? Ultimately giving the ability back to the customer to take action quickly, leveraging and using the information that's already provided within SAM. But if they do have, up-to-date scans that are quickly able to pull in that information through automated fashion, that might be a good option as well. So it's not either or, maybe it's both at the same time, right? Depending on what you identify through the scanners. So, thanks for the demonstration.
Yeah, no, and there's a question in the chat. Can ServiceNow give information if a vulnerability is being exploited currently? The short answer is absolutely yes. So, within the SecOps modules, right, we're not a vulnerability scanner. We rely on the Qualys, Tenables, Rapid7s, you name it, to pull that information in. But we also rely on integrations with like NVD and CISA. So you can definitely use like CISA KEVs are a very common data point used to determine if a vulnerability is known to be exploitable, and you can 100% pull that into the platform and build that into your overall your logic, for sure.
I'm gonna be the stupid one on the call, but some of what you gave back, right? Those, the Tenables of the world, those are agent based or agentless based discovery kind of capabilities on the SecOps team, our SecOps side, that we can also integrate. Those other two that you provided, are those like security postures or frameworks? Or
us security people love acronyms. So
well, in IT general, right?
So NVD is a national vulnerability database. So that is it is a national database of vulnerabilities, and so we integrate with that. It's like a free feed. It pulls in all the vulnerabilities that are known. And CISA is the, oh boy, I gotta think of the exact acronym, but basically cybersecurity.
What is it?
Yeah, I forget the exact acronym, but CISA, the CISA KEVs are basically, a KEV is a known exploitable vulnerability. So what that is, and folks often use this to kind of curate down the list of vulnerabilities that they're focusing on in their environment. So it's basically a vulnerability that is known to have an exploit, right? A lot of vulnerabilities that are out there are theoretical. So like in a perfect sandbox, in a perfect lab, someone was able to exploit something, but there's not a threat actor out there using it. It is, again, theory. The CISA KEV bulletins are called, are actually, people are out there exploiting this in the wild.
Oh, wow.
So,
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Definitely good points that you can bring in, right, into the platform to have a visibility instead of having to go out to their separate portals or log into that information outside of the platform. So good call. Did you want to talk about this really quickly, or should we keep going?
I'll actually demo this quick. You think we
Okay,
got time for like a 3-minute demo?
let's do it.
All right, let's
That's
do
what
it.
everybody's here for. Nobody wants to see slideware and hear us talk and make jokes, awful jokes. But yeah,
All
no, go.
right.
Love it, Tim.
Okay, let's just jump in here. Let me know when you can see my screen.
You're good.
All right. So, so this is, I'm just going to run through what security posture control is. So this is another ServiceNow SecOps offer control is it's going to allow you to visualize and report on security gaps that might exist in your environment. So and the reason I want to show this is because this is really on the asset side, right? So this leverages service graph connectors to pull data in. So maybe some of the common ones that you're using to pull in asset data, right? Maybe it's Active Directory, Jamf, or others. What it's going to do is, so we can pull that information in, and so we can see right in this dashboard, we've got a count of our assets. We've got our top 5 sources that are pulling in asset information. What this lets you do is, so you've got that asset information you're pulling in from those service graph connectors. You can actually connect your security tooling via service graph connectors here. And then you can start to see where you have gaps. So a couple of the key insights that I'll just talk about, I'll make this quick. These are like the top 3. Is endpoint protection installed, right? So we've got a service graph connector pulling in, all of our computers from Active Directory that are not stale, right? They've been updated within 90 days. But is our endpoint protection software service graph connector reporting those same assets? And if it's not, we have a problem, right? So we have a coverage gap here. And the same, it's really rinse and repeat across these other categories, again, pulling in assets from your directory, but are they managed, right? Are they getting configuration changes pushed to them? Are they being patched? Are they being, actively managed, or are they just sitting out there kind of in the Ethereum? So it's just really important data points to know from a security perspective. And last but not least, vulnerability scan coverage, right? So we've got that list of assets again, but is our vulnerability scanner reporting it? And this is an area where we see, I see in my conversations with customers and in my practitioner days is one of the biggest places for a security gap, because there are maybe routes that are not correct on a firewall, so your scanner can't get to the machines on those subnet, or maybe it's a sensitive device that can't be scanned real time. There is generally an overlap and a gap there. So it's an important metric to be able to report on. So you have the ability to go in here and create far more detailed insights and policies than I'm going to show in this demo. There's a lot of metadata that can come back with these security connectors, but since we're here talking about assets, I did just want to kind of highlight this. It is an important use case of overall asset visibility in the security space.
Awesome. Appreciate that. So we did have a couple questions. Sorry, I'm kind of trying to answer them, but I'll just answer them live rather than go through. So one of the questions was, the ServiceNow provide an overall asset risk score. So within the platform, within that reporting that I had showed prior to, when it talks about end of life, end of support, end of extended support, the reporting that comes with HAM and SAM, there is a risk score associated with that, as far as, is it high risk, medium risk, low risk, and those, we do provide a risk level to you. So that it would, again, if you have it maybe in a server environment, it might be a higher risk, especially if it's or an extreme risk, right? If it's already past end of life. So there's some basic, I would say, very basic ratings that we provide to you out of the box, but you can actually go in and tweak that to meet a matrix that you might have within your own environment. So that's one thing that we provide on the software and hardware side. Tim, I don't know, do you have any kind of risk matrix provided on the security side that might be maybe on the CIs or anything like that that you're aware of?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, and that's another kind of great, power of the platform, better together story. You can, so I'm just actually I'm gonna present here again because why not?
Sure,
So let me know when you can see that. So,
we can see it.
specifically to vulnerability response and security incident response, which I'm not going to get into SIR today, but within VR, right, you have the ability. So that this is a challenge that a lot of security programs face nowadays is, how do I rate the risk for an associated vulnerability, right? A lot of your traditional teams have been just relying on the CVSS score, right? Like, oh, it's a 10, the world's on fire, let's run around like crazy. But there's a lot, the reality is there's a lot of criteria that go into kind of determining an overall risk score. So we have within VR, we have a risk calculator that you can, if there's a data point in the platform, so like end of life, end of support, those are data points that we can pull out. We can assign weights to those, and that can impact the overall risk score. So you can see down here, this is just using like CI exposure. Is it internet facing? What's the business service criticality? The vulnerability severity, things like that. Is there an exploit that does exist for it? And we can assign weights to these. And again, you can add, like if you can pull the data point out of the platform, you can add it here as a risk criteria. And you can see, so this kind of heat map down below shows what the resultant risk score is based on that. And this is real time. You could go in and adjust these weights in real time, and it will update down here what your resulting risk score would look like. So to answer the question directly, yes. Yeah, so if you have like an end of support, if you have a Windows 2003 server still on your network, like that, like was definitely end of life. You could give that a risk score of like, 100 very easily. This allows you to refactor risk based on, and this is really a really powerful tool within vulnerability response. It allows you to refactor that risk based on what matters to your organization, not just CVSS scores. So,
Love it. So hopefully that answered the question. And then one more question. I don't know if we answered this already, but it was dropped in the chat. Can ServiceNow also give information if a vulnerability is being exploited currently? So it sounds like, if I remember correctly, that's coming through some of those feeds that we have. So you want to just hit that one more time and we can put that one to bed.
Yeah. I think I might have answered this one already, but definitely.
Did you? Okay.
Again, with using the CSACEV information, 100%.
Okay. I'll try and keep up next time. Thanks for calling me out, Tim. All good. Just kidding. So let me share my screen. Let's go ahead and start wrapping things up. Again, stay tuned with us. If you have further questions, we can give you an opportunity to come off and talk with us. But some of the things that are going on out in the world around asset management and SecOps, we have a few, I guess 4 different workshops that are going on around the U.S. So we'll definitely have to figure out something for those Costa Rica people that are over there. Definitely want to make sure we give you love. But we have a Wear Them hands-on workshop. So there's a lab included in that on both software and assets. That's September 10th. That'll be given, Rich will be part of that session. I will be in San Diego on September 19th and doing a workshop, again, hands-on lab session for customers in San Diego. And then Rich will be doing one for New York. And depending on how many people we get actually going to the New York session, there might be a call back to do a second session, because we tend to have a lot of customers going and visiting that location. So feel free to come out. And if you're interested in any of these workshops, reach out to your AEs. They can definitely make sure that we get you registered for them. We would love to see you in person, shake your hand, do some introduction. And then on the SecOps side, it looks like we have a Top Golf, which looks a lot funner than doing something in the in the office. I need to do a Top Golf one, but we do have a Top Golf over in Charlotte, North Carolina, on September 18th. Tim, will you be at that location, or is that
I will be
being run? Okay,
I will be there, and it's hands-on as well. So hands-on with VR and SPC. So
love it. So yeah, give us the opportunity to meet you in person. Don't be shy. So to grab this material after the fact, we do have our website is live. So if you scan this QR or go to this specific website, then you can actually go into and see all press recordings. You're able to register for the next session that's coming up, which I'll talk to on the next slide. But being able to manage the material and gather it on your own. I will still continue to send out, for anybody that's been part of these sessions, I'll still continue to send out thank you emails after this with links to the recordings on YouTube, links to our website, and then also the slide deck that we shared in this session. But do give us some time. It does take a minute to get our extended team to upload that into YouTube, and then ultimately get that linked over into the website itself. But we will definitely make sure that we follow up with you. So take a look at that website and let us know what you think. So what is our next session? So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll real quick before I show what we're going to be talking about. But if you can go ahead and answer the poll of anything that you're interested in, better together features within the platform. Again, we can't go over Xanadu yet. Product's holding our hands. They're making us sit down and not talk about it. I'm super excited about what's coming down the pipeline and excited to get this in front of y'all. But anything outside of what's coming out in Xanadu is an option as far as the topic. So feel free to drop something in there if you're really interested in talking about it. But our next session is actually going to be about PAM and EAM. So we did do a indoor mapping session. I think it was the last month or the prior to month, where we talked about indoor mapping, and we kind of talked about it within EAM, Enterprise Asset Management, and HAM, Hardware Asset Management. And there seemed to be some questions about, what is EAM and how do you use it, and how is it different than Hardware Asset Management? So we've kind of taken those questions, and we're like, you know what, let's unpack it. Let's talk about it. So we will be actually inviting in 2 experts on the EAM side. So David, he is on our manufacturing team as an asset manager, solution consultant. So he'll be coming in and talking about it from a manufacturing standpoint. Lillian is our EAM expert, so she really dives deep into the capabilities around EAM. And then you'll have myself and Rich that will be talking about the hardware side of it, hardware asset management, which has been around a little bit longer than the EAM side. So any questions that you might have around the 2 different products, please go out, register. We'll definitely try and get those questions answered in the next session. So I will go ahead and stop sharing. I will also stop the recording.